Hi, everybody. I'm Kraig Kann. Right now, on this edition of Tracks to Success, meet a former Major League All-Star catcher who's pitched himself quite a career. He played for 7 teams and was part of a World Series championship. Now, instead of calling pitches, he's calling games as a successful network broadcaster and also dishing out opinion on a daily show that's drawn a big following. He's been a team guy forever with a reputation most wouldn't love, but he says it served him well, and he'll tell you why it matters and why family has become his favorite follow. His name is AJ Pierzynski. Life after the big leagues hardly threw him a curveball he wasn't ready for, and his inspiring story of success starts now.
Welcome to Tracks to Success. This is the podcast that brings you inspiring people and their inspiring stories, how they found their way to the top, and how their path can help you do the same. Here's your host, network broadcaster, C-suite executive, best-selling author, speaker, and entrepreneur, Kraig Kann.
AJ, it's great to have you. Thanks so much for spending some time. How you doing?
I am doing fabulous, Kraig. How are you?
I'm doing great. Let's start with the World Series. Why wouldn't we, right? Not where you think I'm going on this because, it was a few weeks ago, but 2 Yankee fans interfere in right field with Dodger right fielder Mookie Betts. I mean, your immediate reaction was what? That was crazy.
My immediate reaction is, what the hell are they doing? And my second reaction is, thank God Mookie Betts didn't get more, angrier than what he was. Throw his glove or throw his ball. And then third of all, those dudes should be kicked out for a long time. Those 2 guys should be kicked out. I don't know what their season, I think they have family season tickets. They should honestly probably lose their season ticket privilege for a while and then have to get back on the wait list, because what they did was wrong. And then what their actions were after, where they were like, oh, we've been waiting for that moment. We're going to defend our area. No, that's not what you're supposed to do. If they reached out into the field of play, grabbed Mookie's arm, pulled it into the stands, he's standing there like this. I mean, if something, God forbid, would have happened to Mookie's arm, you got all kinds of problems. It was an awful look for the Yankees. It was an awful look for sport. And worst of all, it was an awful look for those 2 guys.
No doubt. No doubt. It made Steve Bartman look like nothing had ever
happened. But Bartman didn't do anything. But Bartman just reached up and hit the ball before Alou caught it. It wasn't like he grabbed a player and was trying to physically remove the ball from his glove like these 2 fools were doing. It was bad.
Yeah. Okay, baseball. It's become a lot harder to win the World Series. I'm assuming you agree with that. The playoffs are bigger, longer, more teams. Put your player cap on first. Maybe that's what you have on, albeit backwards. Do you like that? More teams and a tougher road to win the title?
I don't want it to become like basketball or hockey, where almost every team makes the playoffs and you say, yeah, we had a great year because we finished 8th in our conference and or 8th in our league, and we got a 2-game playoff series, or we got a play-in game, like the NBA has the play-in game now. And it's all about money. I get it. I like where they're at. I hope they don't expand. I think it cheapens it and it lessens it, because people don't understand how hard it is to get to the postseason in baseball. I mean, it used to be really hard. Imagine there was only 2 teams that went. Now, granted, there was less teams, and then they went to 4, and then they went. Now, obviously, they went to 6, and now they're at 8. So I like where it's at. Let's just keep it where it is. Let's just kind of, let the teams, the best teams, play each other. And that's what we actually got this year in the Yankees and the Dodgers. The best team in the American League and the best team in the National League.
Yeah, absolutely. And from a broadcaster standpoint, which we're going to get into with you in just a bit, it has to be great, right? I mean, as a player, maybe it's different, but as a broadcaster, you have to love it. As a fan, I think it keeps more interest during the regular season. I think that's great, but I don't want the watered down thing. That's not good.
Well, the 10 teams that we have now, the second and the third wild card, right? I don't want to say it's watered down, but it does keep the fans interested in a lot more markets than would have been. Because if you're around 500, even at the trade deadline, your team has to make a decision organizationally. Are we going to try and get this second or third wild card and possibly have to play a division winner and maybe lose in 2 games and go home? Or are we going to move guys that we can trade for prospects and for, moves down the road? So it's going to be it's changed the way the game is played more on an organizational standpoint, because players are always going to try and win. Players aren't out there not trying to win. It's an organizational philosophy. Hey, we're actually going to try for the third wild card. You look at like Arizona went to the World Series last year, and some teams get there and actually win it out of those second and third wild cards. That's what makes it such a tough thing for these organizations.
Let's talk about your career. 7 teams: Twins, Giants, White Sox, Rangers, Red Sox, Cardinals, Braves. 98 to 2000. What you called it quits?
16.
Yep, 2016.
16.
Yep. So tell me the highlight of your career. If you were inducted into the Hall of Fame, what would be the first thing that AJ Pierzynski would talk about?
Obviously, winning a World Series in 2005 is the ultimate. I don't think that people can understand. I don't know how I could compare it to Kraig winning an Oscar or like a national Emmy or something like that. Getting whatever the highest award you could have for your profession. That's basically what it is. I know it's not an individual, an MVP or a Cy Young if you're a pitcher, but for a team player and for a team sport to get to the top of the mountain for that one moment is something that is just, it's indescribable. It's actually unbelievable when it happens, because you're like, wait, we just won the whole freaking thing. We just won the World Series against 29 other teams in a city of Chicago that hadn't won it in 88 years, hadn't been to the playoffs in like over 50 plus. I mean, the World Series in like 50 plus years, around 50 years. So it was a crazy time, and it was just still, when you look back, that's the one thing. No matter what, all-star games are cool and this and that, and individual accomplishments are cool, but the one thing people can never take away from you is that you were on a World Series winning team.
And I'm going to take that a step further in just a little bit, and we'll circle back to that. I was hoping that was what you were going to go with, being a Chicago guy and a White Sox fan myself. By the way, painful year. Let's talk about your journey. Let's talk about your journey. Born in New York, but Orlando was high school. My question is this: was it your dream always to be a baseball player, to be a professional baseball player? Like, did you play wiffle ball in the backyard and you were this guy or that guy and dreaming of a World Series?
Of course. I think, listen, I was born in New York. I moved to Orlando when I was 2 years old. So I really, even though on the back of like my baseball card, it said I was born in New York, I was never like a New York person. I was always an Orlando guy. I've been here since I was 2 years old. I still live in Orlando. It was never New York. So, people are like, oh, I go to do a Yankee game. Like, oh, you're from New York. I'm like, yeah, kind of, sort of, in a roundabout way. But I use it to my advantage. Let's just say I use New York to my advantage when I need to go play golf. I'm like, well, I was born in New York. And they're like, oh, okay. So yeah, I don't consider myself from New York, but as far as like being a baseball, that's all I can ever remember wanting to be. People are like, what would you be if you weren't a Major League Baseball player? And I was like, honestly, I don't know. I signed out of high school when I was 17 years old. I played professional baseball till I was 40 years old. I'm still involved in Major League Baseball doing broadcasting. So I don't know, because honestly, I was so lucky and fortunate and blessed that I just never had to think about it. People say, what would you have gone to college for? And I'm like, well, I think I would have done something medical, but again, I just don't know, because I never really had to worry about it.
Yeah. Medical.
Yeah.
Well,
I know. People think I'm stupid. I was actually kind of smart, Kraig. So
you were you were an A student?
I used to be.
True?
I used to be.
Okay.
Not anymore. If you ask my wife, I'm like a C student.
Oh, okay. But you tell your kids, do your homework. It matters.
Yes. My kids are, they're doing very well in school so far.
Yeah.
One graduated high school, so we're good on her. And then my son's a senior, and he's doing just fine.
So you were a one sport athlete, right? That was it. Baseball was everything. I mean, you definitely have a football body that you could have played something else.
No, I played basketball until 10th grade, and then I was like, yeah, this isn't going to work. Let's focus on baseball. And what's funny is when I was the high school I went to, Dr. Phillips, we kind of had the football coach and the baseball coach didn't really like each other, so you kind of had to choose one or the other. And Johnny Damon and a guy named Brian Barber, who made it to the big leagues and was a pitcher and is now the director of scouting for the Phillies. Everyone kind of had to make these decisions, and baseball was the way to go, because baseball at the time when I was in high school, at the high school I went to, was the main sport.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt about that. So are you a guy as a dad and a a leader, if you will, in your industry? Are you a guy who subscribes or would tell kids play them all, or would you tell them to focus on one?
I would. Well, it's harder now, because everyone that just focuses on it just gets more advanced, right? So people that are saying like play them all, yes, I agree with that. Until you get to a certain point, though, you run into, and we've run into it a little bit at First Academy where I used to help coach, is the kids that play football and basketball and then come to baseball are behind because they don't get the full fall of baseball. They don't get the full training for baseball when the season starts. So they come out after playing football and basketball. They come out in February, March. We're already a month into it. And then all these other kids have been training and doing everything for baseball. So do I think it helps at a younger age? Absolutely. Play other sports. But there's going to come a time if this is the sport you want to play, just because of the way of the world. It has nothing to do with not being athletic or this and that. Now, being able to do both is something that's incredible, and very select few, as we know, have been able to do it. But at some point, you're going to have to specialize. And I don't necessarily love it, but it's just what you have to do.
Yeah. Who influenced you in your life? Who was the person, if you were saying, this was my compass, this was the person that pointed me in the proper direction, not just on the baseball field, but growing up, pointed you in the right direction in life?
It would have to be my mom. I mean, my mom and dad were divorced when I was super young. My mom got remarried when I was, kind of young again. But yeah, it was my mom. She was always there. I grew up with my mom. I lived with my mom. She loved baseball. And not that she ever pushed me or, made me say like, oh, I want you to do this. This is what I want you to do. She always was there. She always helped me. They took time off from work to get me to these things, get me to everything I needed to be at. They were always there to support me. No pressure. I kind of hope that's the way my kids feel, that like at no point have I ever said to my son, you're going to play baseball and you're going to do this. Like, no, I'm like, play whatever you want. Actually, I feel like sometimes I was like, don't play baseball, like play another sport, just because I didn't want him to have to deal with the name. And people are still to this day, they constantly compare him to me. And it's not a fair comparison because we're different people. And my son has grown up to be a great kid and a good baseball player, but a better person. And that's kind of what we all strive to. And that's kind of what my mom always was like, listen, baseball's there, but let's try to be a good, normal human being.
Yes, no question about that. AJ, what's tougher, making it to the major leagues, if you think about your journey, or making a name for yourself, like truly arriving, if that makes sense, once you get there?
Making it was hard, obviously, because you got to weed through all the minor leagues and all the people and the players from around the world that are signed and drafted and become into an organization. But I think staying, we always say making it is easy, staying is hard. If you look at how many players have played in the major leagues, it's still under like 30,000 people that have ever played in the major leagues. It's mid 20,000s, I think, something like that, if not a little bit higher. But then you look at how many guys make the 10 years. So the goal as a player is you get 10 years, you max out your pension, you kind of get all the benefits. But if you look at the number of those people, it is significant. I think I don't know if it's still under 2,000, but it's under like 2,000. It was last time I checked, under 2,000 people have ever got their 10 years of time. And I think that's the harder thing, because what happens is, what you don't understand is you made it. All right, I made the major leagues. And you kind of go, oh, all right, I made it. Well, then you realize once you get there that there's all the people that you were trying to come get your job, they're all still coming. So it's not just your organization you're dealing with, and let's say you're the starting catcher. There's 30 of those guys in the world, right? So I was fortunate enough to do it for almost 20 years, and there was 30 of my job in the entire world. There's how many millions of people that want to take that job every single day, right? Whether it's college, high school, junior college, minor leagues, from a foreign country, they all want the job that I have. So what do you do every day to prove your value and prove your worth, that it's worth that team investing in you and keeping you around, instead of going to find a younger version, and you have to find something that sets you apart.
So there's pressure. There's major pressure, maybe not trying to get there, but trying to stay there. And when I was in my time at Golf Channel, and you and I have this love affair for the game of golf, we used to talk about the PGA Tour. And a friend of mine who was an analyst at Golf Channel, Mark Lai, used to say that PGA Tour card is on loan. It is on loan. You get it, but keeping it is the hardest thing in the world. And that's what makes professional golf great. So it sounds like you subscribe to the same theory when it comes to baseball and that pressure to hang around and continue to contribute and be a star.
I don't know that I never felt pressure to stay, right? I don't think that pressure is the right word. I think it's just, it's there it's kind of there without thinking about it. Every time they have a draft. And I remember when I was with Minnesota, right? I was the starting catcher. We went to the playoffs 2 out of my 3 years. There's the full-time starter. And they draft Joe Mauer, my first year starting. They're like, oh, well, you won't be here very long. And less than 3 years later, guess what? They traded me. away. So Joe Mauer, who now is in the Hall of Fame, they clearly made the right decision. But here he is, boom. So they trade me away and get assets, and then you become a free agent. And then teams, you're like, okay, well, your family calls you and says, oh, I'd love you to play for the Dodgers. Oh, I'd love you to go to the Yankees. Oh, I'd love you to go here. And you're like, well, they already have a guy there. So everyone thinks like, oh, you get a free agency and you're gonna get like 10 years, 200 million, and you're like, well, that's not really my value. That's not really my worth. So you take what you can get and you try to pick the best spot where you can go and try to win and try to play. It's a constant battle of how can I keep my value up, keep my worth up, and find a way to play? Because the more you play, the more your value goes up. So can I find a place where I can impact the team, impact the clubhouse, and allow myself to get at bats and play so that other teams can see your value? That it was never a pressure. It was more of just there. And I want to perform. I think you put more pressure on yourself. Like I want to perform for myself and my family. Forget the rest of the people. That's just noise.
That's no different in the corporate world. You gotta find your way there, and you gotta earn your keep. A quick minute to welcome a partner to the podcast and tell you about a great deal just for you. Here's a question. Do you wear hats? Of course you do. Then you need to know about Ahead. Ahead doesn't follow the trends, they set them, providing the best in headwear, styles, fabrications, and ornamentations for 25 years. And by listening to this podcast, you get a chance to save big. Visit aheadusashop.com, use the code TTS, that's Tracks to Success, to receive 20% off your order. That's aheadusashop.com. Use the exclusive code TTS, 20% off, just for listening. Talking with AJ Pierzynski, guy who's got more than 2,000 hits, all-star, World Series champ. All right, this is a little bit of a conflicting, we'll call it, topic. You've had the image of being a tough guy, a guy who was tough on a locker room and in a locker room, but also a guy who was a leader and a really good locker room guy. Which one fits you best?
Depends on who you ask, I guess. I don't know. It depends on what kind of person you were. Listen, I was not inside my locker room. Listen, I just wanted to win. And outside of my locker room, I just wanted to win the game that day and would do anything I would take. I feel like sometimes there were certain expectations that I was brought up with, not, through the minor leagues and through when I first got to the major leagues, that I expected people to perform and show up and do their job the right way. Now it's changed and things, and I get the times change. But there was an expectation for me, like, you're going to show up on time, you're going to work, and you're going to do the best you can to help us win that day. And if you didn't comply to that, there were times where, I would say something to you. And a lot of times guys were afraid to say something. And I was like, listen, this is not the way we do it here. And yes, some people took it the right way and some people took it the wrong way. So that was their opinion. But I was there to try to win the game that day, try to win for that year. And listen, I wasn't going out of my way to make friends, especially on the other teams. Now, did I know guys on the other team? Of course. Did I love guys on the other team? Yes. When we played for those 3 hours, we were not friends. They're trying to take money out of my pocket, and I'm trying to get every dollar out of their pocket. I mean, that was the way you had to look at it. But I mean, listen, I played differently than most people. I had to play with like a fire and almost an internal hate. And that was something that I learned kind of in the minor leagues and was like, listen, this is the way you have to play. So I would invent it sometimes. So would I go to the ballpark in a bad mood? Yeah, I admit that. But that was the way I had to get up to play every day. I mean, I played a lot of games in my career and I was ready to go every day. And the reason I could do that is I basically talked myself into it mentally. I don't recommend that to anybody because it's a tough way to go through it. But for me, it was what I had to do. And that was the way that worked to get me in the lineup every day and get me excited and ready to go for that game. Not that you aren't for a Major League Baseball game, but like that was what drove me. I was like, all right, I'm going to, I wanted somebody to say something about me. Like, I'm going to prove you wrong. No matter what you say, I will prove you wrong.
If people do a Google search on AJ and you put in videos, there's one that's going to come up. Actually, there's a few. And I think you probably know where I'm going with this. All right. Catcher on catcher, crosstown game, Cubs, White Sox, little situation, we'll call it, at home plate. All right. What was that all about? And do you, when you see that, do you like, oh my gosh?
what it was all about was there was a play at the plate. We were playing the Cubs. We had just won the World Series. The Cubs hadn't won. They were kind of lipping off a little bit. We were playing great. We had a great team in 2006, the year after we won. Probably a better team than we had the year before, but things just didn't work out. We didn't win. We had some injuries and some miscues down the stretch. But we go into that season. I think we were the best team in baseball around the All-Star break, and that was right around the All-Star break time. And we had a play at the plate, and Michael Barrett, I ran him over, and it was exciting. Those games, you have to understand, those games in Chicago, both teams were trying. I mean, really, really trying to win.
Yeah.
Those 6 games a year were, I don't want to say they were playoff atmosphere, but in the city of Chicago, they almost meant more than anything else that happened for the rest of the year. If you won those 6 games, you were like the kings of the town because everybody watched, everybody paid attention. Again, both teams were trying. So we went into that series. It was the first one. We had just won the World Series. We have the play at the plate. I kind of was excited. The crowd was going crazy. I kind of slapped home plate. I went to get my helmet. Michael Barrett punched me. Everyone's seen the highlights. Did people say, everyone obviously asked me about that because that's like the one thing I remember. And I'm like, they're like, are you embarrassed by it? I'm like, no, I'm not embarrassed because it was a moment in time that happened and people will always remember and say I was there and this and that. What I find funny is people really don't remember the whole story because people are like, oh, I remember when you punched the Cubs catcher. And I'm like, yeah, okay, that's kind of not what happened, but whatever. But no, am I embarrassed by it? No. I actually think it's more embarrassing for him, right? Because he punched me with a clean shot and there was no like mark, there was no stagger. If I feel like if I got a free shot at somebody, you would think I'd at least leave a mark, right?
I will tell full disclosure to everybody out there. AJ and I have known each other for a while in Orlando. Okay. And I am a White Sox fan. He knows that. If I was picking a video, it would be drop third strike in the playoffs with the Angels and the whole thing. Cause I was actually at that game, but nonetheless, that's not what always comes up first. Ozzie Guillen, White Sox manager, your manager for the World Series, said, quote, if you play against him, you hate him. If you play with him, you hate him a little less. Doesn't that just say that you cared more than a lot of other guys? I mean, I actually find that to be a real compliment.
Depends on how, people take that a different way. Listen, Ozzie and I are friends, okay? Ozzie and I have had our backs and forth. Even when I played for him, there was many times where I was in his office, like, can you just shut up and stop talking about me, talk about somebody else? And he would laugh because he knew I could take it, right? So yeah, I take that as a compliment from Ozzie because as I always say about Ozzie, if you played for him, or no, if you played against him, you hated him. If you played for him, you hated him more. So I'm like, we're kind of on the same page, Ozzie, a little bit. But he was fine. He played me. Listen, Ozzie Guillen played me every day. He wanted to win every game. And that's all he wanted out of a manager. For him to say that about me is fine. Yes, it did mean – it meant what we talked about a little bit earlier where I just said, listen, there was a standard I wanted to hold people accountable to because I tried to hold myself to that standard, which was show up ready to play every day. I don't care what you do off the field. I don't care where you go, what you do. Mm-hmm. But when those lights come on at 7:05, be ready to go. And if you're not, I'm going to say something to you.
Yeah. I want to tie this to corporate a little bit. I talk to corporate leaders in some of the workshops and the different things that I do about building a brand worth following. So my question to you, as a player, did you ever think about that? Did you ever think about, in other words, like what my legacy currently is, how people view me, and what it might be when I'm done playing? I want to build something in my career that creates worth when my playing days are over.
Honestly, I never did. I think it's changed now with social media. I never had social media until about the last 2 years since doing our podcast TV show. Honestly, I didn't care because there was no social media. There was no brand. You didn't really start hearing athletes talk about branding until the 2012, 10 to 15 range, which is kind of at the back end of my career. Like I didn't care about all I cared about was winning. And I had enough things going on. I mean, I was doing Fox TV for the postseason since like 2004, right? 2011. I started doing pre and post game while I was playing. Mm-hmm. So I knew that people knew who I was and I had a brand. And honestly, the reputation that I had, as much as it did suck sometimes, it opened so many doors and avenues to me because people wanted to say like, man, is he really like that big of an asshole? Like that was kind of the thing, right? So wrestling opened up to me, doing post-game stuff and pre and post-game stuff on national TV. People always wanted to interview me. People always wanted to talk to me because one, I was going to give you an honest answer. And two, they just wanted to see if like what they had heard was true. And so I didn't really care about that. And now it's a little bit different. I'm 47 years old. I got, a kid at college, a kid that's a senior in high school. So they can Google and they see stuff and they'll ask me like, Dad, what about this story? And I'll tell them because they were too young to remember a lot of them. But, other than that, like I still listen, I'm just me, man. If people like it, they like it. And if they don't, then, I'll find it. I got friends. I don't need too many friends in life.
In addition to hosting this podcast, Kraig leads the Kann Advisory Group, focused on elevating communication for companies and individuals. Company consulting, team and individual workshops, mind-altering virtual programs. To learn more and to find out why the Elevate workshop has been labeled the most powerful experience in leadership communication, visit cannadvisory.com. And when you do connect, mention the Tracks to Success podcast to receive your special discount. Now, back to the interview.
Talking with former All-Star catcher, AJ Pierzynski. 2,000 plus hits, AJ, in your career. Is there one specific hit that you replay in your mind that stands out to you?
Well, I think you always remember your first one, your first hit. I think that's always the one because you're like, okay, I got one. They can never take that one away from me. The 2000 obviously was a big deal because at the time I think I was the 9th catcher in history to ever get to 2000. So that was a big one. It was in Fenway. Got a hit, and the Fenway, which it still makes me mad. Fenway didn't even acknowledge it, and the Braves did, but the Fenway didn't even put like a thing up on the scoreboard, which I thought was kind of crap. But that's fine. But the one hit, there's one home run that always stands out. It's one at Wrigley. It's after the fight in 2006. My first game back in Wrigley, we got in the fight at the White Sox park, and I hit a home run in the bottom or the top of the 9th off Ryan Dempster, who I love. He's a friend of mine. And the riot basically broke out because we won the game. We were down by a run or two in the 9th, and I could come up, hit a home run to win the game. I told the reporter, it's funny because back in Wrigley, the old Wrigley, before they redid it, the reporters used to have to come and sit by the on deck circle in the 9th inning because then they would come through the field to get to the clubhouse to interview everybody. So they're all sitting there, and I'm on deck, and I said, if I get up, I'm hitting a home run, and we're winning this game. And Joe Cali, who still works for the Sun-Times, he's the Bulls beat writer, says, yeah, right, you got no chance. Boom, I hit the home run. The fans litter the field with garbage. I mean, they had to stop the game for like 15 minutes. I get a curtain call from the White Sox fans that were in Wrigley, and he just looks at me, and I'm like, I told you. And he's like, that was one of the coolest moments I've ever seen in my life because you said you were going to do it, you did it, and then all the hell that broke loose afterwards. So, I mean, it's hard to take that away. And then I had the ball. A guy caught it. He was walking out of a bar across the street because the ball went onto the street, I think it's Sheffield. And he caught it, and he gave me the ball, so I have the ball. And it was just one of those moments when you look back that is like, okay, that's why you do this.
Yeah, it looks like you got a lot of them behind you, by the way. So there are a few moments in your career, I'm guessing. You joined the White Sox in 2005, played through 2012. Now, the White Sox won the World Series in 2005. I got a little memento behind me. Is that a coincidence, AJ, or do you believe that you actually played a much bigger role than people might think? You join the team, they win the World Series.
I listen, I'm not going to take all the credit in the world. Here's what I'm going to say. We brought in a lot of guys that year. Jermaine Dye, Tadahito Iguchi, Bobby Jenks came up, Dustin Hermanson. There was just a long list of guys that we kind of brought in. And everybody that we brought in fit perfectly. Scott Pasetnik. Fit perfectly in their role. They knew exactly what their role was, and they accepted their role. And then most guys had career years. Not everybody, but a lot of guys had like career years that year. And you win a World Series with a team that's not a superpower like a Dodgers or a Yankees. At the time, it was the Red Sox and the Yankees that were like superpowers. They just had stars. Everybody does their role, and they kind of have a career year. And that's kind of we had. We had bullpen guys that had career years. Neil Kotz, Cliff Polite, guys like that. And they all fit into it, and they do it perfectly. And then we just believe so much in ourselves. I can't describe what it was like to walk into that club. Like we thought we were winning every game. From day one, it was weird. Like the first day of spring training, Ozzy's like, "We're going to try and win every game," and we just felt like over spring training and over time, we just got better and better at it. And I'll give all the credit in the world to my teammates, our pitcher. Listen, we threw 4 complete games in the ALCS. You'll never see that again, right? No. I think we played 5 games against the Angels, the only game we lost in the postseason. And I think our bullpen threw a third of an inning in the ALCS for 5 games. You'll never see that happen again. It was one of the more incredible runs of all time. and it doesn't get enough credit. I'll say that, Craig. Like people will talk about the best teams of all time. We went 11-1 in the postseason, lost one game. There's been one other team, the '98 Yankees, that did that. I don't think you'll ever see that again either. It was just one of those runs that was special. It was meant to be, and I'm just so proud to be a part of it.
You just talked about the complete games and that we won't see that again. There's no way we're going to see that again. And,
no chance.
And that's for multiple different reasons. But does it bother you? I mean, these guys are like such specialized starters are only going to go so long. Relievers are only going to come in and pitch so long. I mean, it is so different, AJ, and it feels like it flipped quickly.
Listen, I'm a starting pitching guy, man. I love looking at the MLB app and seeing like it's Kershaw versus Scherzer, right? In the postseason, you look and you say, oh, Cole versus Yamamoto, or it was Cole versus Flaherty. So you can tune into that because those guys are going to give you innings and go deep. Like that's what the baseball is kind of built on, was the starting pitchers were the star attraction, and then the lineups obviously were the secondary feature. Because you knew if you went to the ballpark and you looked out there and you saw like Corbin Burns has the ball for the Orioles today, and they're playing, the Braves, and it's Spencer Strider, right? You're like, oh man, I get to see two of the best pitchers in the world.
Right.
I know they're going to be out there for a few innings unless something crazy happens, so I can come and watch them and learn from them, and then you get to see how so and so lineup attacks this guy. That's what Major League Baseball is built on, especially the playoffs. It's changed now. Now it's bullpen versus bullpen. I mean, if your starter goes 6 innings, it is like, oh my gosh, he went 6 innings. I'm not for it. I understand the reasoning behind it. I'm not against it, but I wish there was a better solution somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Catcher, I was a high school catcher. I wasn't a good one. All right. And I was mediocre. But it is the position that is, in my opinion, the leader on the field. Everything is in front of them. They are the true leader. They can see it all. Leadership. Let's talk about it. What does that mean to you as a professional athlete? What defines a leader in sports in your mind?
Someone that does what they're supposed to do. I mean, on the field, obviously, but behind the scenes, I think guys that come to the, especially in baseball, you show up to the park every day, you're ready to go. You're accountable for your actions. When you strike out, you stand there and you say, yeah, I struck out with the bases loaded. It's going to happen again. It's happened before. It's going to happen again. Right. And then what the work you put in when no one's looking, that's what guys look to, right? They look to the guy that shows up, puts the work in, does what he needs to do to be ready to play. Listen, I played with Nick Markakis, right? He did barely talk to the media, but behind the closed doors, he was there every day. He played every game. He worked the same every day, and he was just awesome. And you would look to him. Young guys would look and be like, I want to be like Nick Markakis, right? Paul Konerko, he talked a little bit, but he was very quiet, but he did his work, and he just did his work. And guys would say, man, that's someone I aspire to be. And then you have success, and then it becomes even more. So to me, it's accountability. It's showing up every day, doing the work. And you can't push yourself trying to be a leader. I played with guys that really tried to be like that guy, and you're like, don't really see it out of you because it's kind of fake. It can't be faked. It has to be, kind of born through whatever you're doing, and other people kind of start taking notice. That's what it is. Like I played with Freddie Freeman in 2015, 2016. If you would have told me Freddie Freeman would be where he's at right now with his, I would have said no, because he was just a younger kid. And I was like, man, Freddie's got some ways to go, but he learned a lot. He grew up a lot. And now he's the Freddie Freeman you see on TV. I mean, he's always a great guy. He was always smiling. He was always there. But, he had some growing up to do, as we all did. And I think now Freddie's a guy that the Dodgers look at as a leader of their team.
So what would you tell then a CEO about managing his or her team? Like, what's the most important thing then that you learned in years where your success was based on team success? What needs to translate in a boardroom or in a corporate setting?
Well, I think the first thing you need to do is let everybody kind of be themselves, right? It's harder. See, obviously easier said than done to let people just be themselves, but accept for what they're going to do and figure out their strengths and try to accentuate whatever their strengths are. And then, like I always say this, accountability, man. To me, that is number one. Like when you screw up, just say it. I screwed up. Trust me. I've been married for almost 25 years. Like I've screwed up plenty of times, and hey, I screwed up. And when you forget to do the dishes or you forget to take the garbage, I'm sorry, I forgot.
I know. Lisa's told me as we've watched our kids play sports, and
yeah, I mean, but that to me, nothing goes farther than accountability to me, to people. When you say, hey, I screwed up, I made a mistake, I'm sorry. I'm going to try and learn from it, and then listening to what they have to say too. Your people that are beneath you, because you're going to need their help at some point. Nobody can run a corporation, a baseball team, anybody without people that are beneath them and helping them. And you got to also, one thing that I always don't understand is all these teams and all these places that they want everybody to get along and nobody to stand up to what they say, what they think is a bad idea. Well, no, you got to have somebody at some point, some people say, hey, listen, I don't agree with that. But you also have to be able to argue with them and then get over it, right? So, hey, I might have a great idea, and I go to my team at Foul Territory, the podcast, and they're like, I don't really think that's a good idea. And you're like, well, you guys are stupid. And then they explain to me their side of it. Can I get over it? And I think as a leader, you have to be able to get over it and understand where the other people are coming from.
Yeah, I think great leaders are change agents. They're able to shift people from one side to another side, but they do have to have reasoning behind it that's solid, that will get people to follow through influence. The money in baseball and sports, I mean, it's big. It's astronomical. Changed guys because of it. Perhaps the value of maybe the opportunity of even being a big leaguer or in professional sports is lost because of all the money, or do you not see that at all?
I think there are people. Now, listen, I'm not going to say all players, because there are people that have definitely been affected by the money they've signed for and the money they're getting paid. But to me, it was net. I know people say this all the time. Yes, the money was a great perk, an added bonus that, I was fortunate enough to make enough money to where, most people will never see in their lifetime, and I can live happily off of what I made. But to me, like when I signed a contract, it was more like I want to prove them right by signing me this contract. It wasn't like, oh man, okay, I made it. I signed for this amount of money. I've made it in life. No, I was like, I want to prove them right. Like I want to prove them right now. I feel like most players have that feeling, and I think that's why sometimes everyone says, "Oh, he signed a big contract. He's struggling because he's relaxed." I think most guys actually struggle because they're trying to prove the team right for a year or whatever it is if they sign a long-term deal. They're like, okay, you signed me to 300 million. I'm going to make sure that I'm worth instead of just doing what they did to get them there, right? And to me, that's what most players are. Most players want to win. Most players want to play. And most players want to live up to the hype of their contract. And it's not a pressure thing. It's just an internal thing that, like, I want to prove this team right for choosing me as their guy.
Interesting. AJ, you played a long time in the majors. What did it teach you about you? Like, as you reflect, and I'm sure there's some pinch yourself moments about what you accomplished, but what did you really learn about you as a human being?
We always have this conversation. We've had this conversation in my family a lot. Like, listen, just be yourself. I mean, because in life, there's like, if you have 5 friends, right, that like are really your friends, your family's going to be there for you. Your kids are more than like, I mean, unless something tragic happens, they're going to be there for you. Your parents are going to be there for you when you make mistakes. But in life, if you have like 5 friends that you can like truly count on, like if you have, I mean, Kraig, if you have a friend that you can call at 3 a.m. to bail you out of jail, if God forbid something goes terribly wrong,
right,
and then they don't tell anybody, like that's kind of one of your people in your life you can count on. Not that I ever want that to happen to anybody, but I'm just saying, like, using that as an example, right? So to me, like, yes, the people that I played with in baseball, were they my friends? Yes. But are they people that I can truly count on? You have to count on yourself, and you have to believe in yourself. And then you have to make these people that you're around, these 25 other people that you're around every day, feel like family. But you also have to understand they have their individual interests there too. So you have to understand that. And then they have the team interest with them. So how do you balance that and make everybody feel like one? Even though at the end of the day, listen, there's teammates I played with that I barely talk to. There's teammates I play with that I talk to all the time, right? But during those 6, 7, 8 months that we're together, you feel like family. So just, to me, it's like, be yourself and understand that at the end of the day, especially in such a transient business like baseball, these guys are your friends now, but 5 years from now, you might never talk to them again.
Well, you've got 2 kids who are very accomplished, and really good kids. One, a volleyball player in college, and one who's headed off to college after another year of high school in baseball. That's your son. Your daughter's very successful, accomplished volleyball player. What's the message from a former professional athlete to the young child? I'm not necessarily saying yours, but maybe you said this to them, to the young child who has dreams that they need to hear, right? That some parents might not actually share with them, if you know where I'm going with that.
To me, there's two things. One, you got to figure out a way to enjoy the grind. And I'm not talking about the games, and I'm not talking about the accolades that come along with when you play a game. You got to enjoy the practice, the work that nobody sees. That's the part. If you want to get to the next level and continue to grow, that's the hard part. People get to the major leagues and they're like, "Gosh, I don't want to have to work out, and I don't want to have to do scouting reports, and I don't want to have to do this." But that if you don't enjoy the stuff that nobody sees, then the on the field stuff will come and go. That's the biggest thing. And then for me, I always people are like, "What's the one piece of advice you would tell kids to be a Major League Baseball player?" Which is, again, like we talked about golf being hard, like being a Major League anything, a professional, going to college is hard enough in any sport, right? You got to figure out something that makes you stand out. Whatever your skill is, right? If you're really fast and you can run, you love baseball, you better know how to bunt. You better be able to put the ball on the ground. You better know how to steal bases. You better know how to run the bases, things like that. If you can really throw and let's say you're an outfielder, you know what? Throw every chance you get. Like if there's a fly ball to you, let it eat so people can see you. You have to accentuate your skill set that you have and make it stand out to other people so they can say, man, this kid can do this. Like if you're a basketball player, you might not be able to play great defense, but you can shoot. You better like drill threes, right? I mean, it's whatever you can accentuate. You have to work on your weaknesses, obviously, to make them better and make them serviceable, but you have to have something that stands out. And then when you figure out what that is, make it stand out. We used to have a saying on the White Sox. Canerco used to say this all the time. If you're a flea, be a damn flea, right? Which means if you're just a pesky little son of a bitch, be the peskiest dude in the world. So every time this guy comes up like a Juan Pierre, they're like, man, this flea is driving me crazy, right? Like he's not trying to hit home runs. Juan Pierre's trying to get on base, bunt, run, do all those little things. He knew what he was good at, and he took it to the next level. So figure out your skill set and make it stand out.
Love it. Talk about superpowers all the time in front of executives and rising managerial people in an organization. Figure out what you're great at. Be that person that can carve a niche and succeed with what your strengths are. That's really important. I'm really glad you said it. Do you miss the grind? I mean, the travel, did it wear on you? I don't think people truly understand airplanes, hotels, how tough that is. You talk about the grind that you just talked about, but man, even the media, right? I mean, it's so different today. Do you miss any of that?
I still travel all the time, so I can't say I love traveling. So the travel part to me was fun. I didn't mind. I mean, listen, we're in charter planes. Listen, but you get in at 3 a.m. and all that stuff was fine. But you're still treated like royalty. The travel part didn't bother me. There were times where you'd go like, I got to go here for 10 days and 3-city tour. And you're like, I just want to get home by the 9th or 10th day because you haven't seen your family for 10 days. So that part, yes. Do I miss it? I don't miss. Here's what I you'll always, till the day that I die, I always think that I could play another game. Okay, physically, I feel like I right now could step into the batter's box, get behind the plate, and catch a game tomorrow. Now, it would take me probably a few days, but I feel like I could do it. Just to get caught back up, I'd need a couple like games to figure out the speed of it and all that. But physically, but mentally, I was done. And then I don't miss the getting ready for the game. I don't miss like what we talked about, the grind of it. That was my last year. I was 39 years old, about to turn 40. I've been doing it for almost 2 decades, and I was like, I just can't. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to work out because I have to. I don't want to have to do the scouting reports. I don't want to have to show up and hit early in the cage. I was like, I just want to play the game. That was not the way I had always played. So, no, I don't miss the grind of it at all, but I miss the competition of it, which will never go away.
Looking for a guest speaker for your next event or annual conference? Kraig's message is inspiring and empowering. Visit kraigcannspeak.com to learn more about his topics and find out about his green shoe experience. It's a day your people will talk about long after he's gone. So visit kraigcannspeak.com and mention the Tracks to Success podcast to receive your special discount. Now, back to the show.
Talking with AJ Pierzynski, former big league catcher and a really good one, and now an announcer and a really good one. Talk about your pivot to being an announcer. You said you started doing that toward the end of your playing days, and your online show, Foul Territory, you're really good at it. How much do you enjoy it? What's in it for you? Like, why are you even doing anything? You said you got enough money to not do anything if you don't want to. So what's your why right now?
First of all, I love baseball. Like, I love a lot of sports. My wife always will say that, if there's a sporting event on, you'll watch it, which is probably true because I love
Mhm.
watching competitors compete. But I truly love baseball. It's like in your blood. I don't know. It's in my blood. I can't get it out. Try to watch every game all the time. I love to talk about baseball. So why do I do it? I just love it. I love it. I still am around the guys. Like when I get to work for Fox. Okay, there's basically two announced teams on Fox, and I'm one of them. Okay, so we do Saturday games, national games. We get to do the postseason, and I get to be around baseball, and that's awesome. I can talk about baseball for 3 hours every Saturday. Excuse me, on national television where people can tune in and watch, and they value your opinion. That's pretty stinking awesome, right?
Yeah.
And then why do I do the podcast? Because I just get to talk baseball every day. I get to talk to the players, and it keeps me in touch, Craig. I mean, I'm in touch with the players of today, whereas I've been out for this was what my 7th or 8th year out, so I've been out for a while now. But by doing this podcast, I mean, I get to talk to. We've had over 1,000 different guests, whether it's writers, managers, GMs, team presidents, players, anybody and everyone that's involved in baseball somehow. We've had them all on, and it is
Mhm.
incredible because now when I walk into so Adam Wainwright, who I work with in the
Yeah.
postseason and do some games with him, he also works for Fox. He's like, man, I don't. He's only been out a year. He's like, man, I don't know a lot of these guys. I'm like, yeah, just wait. Every year, guys that you played with are out of the game. I'm like, that's the podcast. What it helps me do, it helps me stay relevant with the players of today. I mean, we did a watch party in the World Series with Brent Rooker, who hit 39 home runs this year, Grayson Rodriguez, Brandon Lau, right? Geez, I forget who else we had on. I mean, we had all these players that are currently on, and we just sat there and talked baseball for 3 hours. And it's incredible how you can keep in touch with them. Then when I walk into the locker room on a Saturday, and it's still kind of awkward because as a former player, I'm like, I knew what I thought about the media when they walked in, but at least I can go up to guys and say, hey, thanks for coming on the show. I really enjoyed talking to you about whatever it is, yada yada from last week. Thank you. And they're, they light up and they're like, oh, they open up to you. And then I can walk up to guys who haven't been on yet and be like, hey man, I'd really like you to come on and we can talk. And they're like, oh, okay, we'll figure out a time. So it just keeps you relevant in the sports eye.
GM calls you tomorrow, says, AJ, we've been following you. You're great on TV. You're great on your podcast. We know you're connected. We want you to be our manager. You in?
I don't know. See, that people always ask me. It depends on where. Depends on if it would have happened 2 years ago. I would have definitely probably said no because I still had two kids in high school that were going through it. My daughter's in college. My son's about to go to college, so they're not going to be home anymore. So it changes your life's perspective when you have young kids and people. When before the White Sox, what was that, 2001 when they hired Tony La Russa? I mean, I had kids in the heart of it, right? So people are like, you should go manage, and I'm like, I don't know, but it would be a hard decision because I really do kind of enjoy what I do now. And I don't care who wins or loses. People on Twitter and Instagram are like, oh, he hates. You're doing a Tigers Royals game. They're like, oh, you hate the Tigers, you hate the Royals. Actually, I don't hate either team. If you listen to our broadcast, we're positive for both teams. We just talk about the game. So if the Tigers are beating the Royals that day, we're going to talk more about the Tigers because that's what's happening in the game. We can't if it's 10-0 Tigers over the Royals or vice versa. We're going to talk about the team that's up 10-0 because how can I be positive about a game I'm doing if the team is losing by 10 runs? So
Yeah.
it's not about that. I don't care who wins or loses, but it's a pretty nice job when you get to fly around, you get to go to nice restaurants, you get to talk to baseball players, and people somewhat respect your opinion.
Yeah. No question about that. Is there a broadcaster that you said, I know you've talked already about, hey, I got to be myself, and you would give that advice, be yourself, figure out what your strengths are. But is there a broadcaster, maybe, I don't know who your idol was when you were a child as far as catchers, maybe it was Johnny Bench or somebody else, but is there a broadcaster that's an analyst that I got to be like him. I got to follow that. I've learned a lot.
What's funny is you never really paid attention, right?
Hmm.
As a player, you weren't paying attention because you only heard your home team's broadcast. So whatever team I was on, I mean, Burt Blyleven when I first got to Twins was awesome because he was so funny and he had such a good time, right? And then I went over to the Giants and you have Kraig Kann and Kuiper, who are two of the best in the business, and they were
Yes.
a little more serious, not as kind of goofy as Burt Blyleven is, but they're great at what they do, and they've been together for like 30 years now, right? And then I went over to the White Sox and we had Hawk and DJ. And listen, I've known Hawk for almost my whole life, so obviously I look at Hawk and say, his only advice to me was just be yourself and don't listen to what people say, and he's right. And then, then you go to Texas and you get their guys and you start bouncing around and you start listening to the guys. And there was never a broadcaster. Everyone I've talked to, like I got to work with Joe Buck, right? Who's people love and hate Joe Buck. I love Joe Buck. Away from the microphone, he's one of the greatest people in the world, most fun. And he said, listen, when you're doing a game, don't worry about what people say. They're going to say you hate both teams like we just talked about. Just be yourself and do the game and do it the way you think that people sitting on their couch that have never watched a baseball game want to hear it. And that's I'm not a heavy stats guy. I'm not a heavy analytics guy. We throw in some analytics because you have to. But I don't think people at home understand that if you're watching your first game ever and you turn into the Yankees versus the Orioles, let's say, right? And you've never watched a baseball game, you don't want to hear about exit velocity and induced vertical break and horizontal and spin rate. You're like, what are they talking about, right? You want to hear why the guy threw this pitch and this guy hit it, and this guy caught it, or this guy made an error, and then how it led to something down the line. Or to me, one of the most important things is trying to figure out what the team is going to do to get through the game, to win that game. How they're going to use the bullpen. Will they use their bench? Why this manager is making A move to B move. That's what I think people want to hear. And plus, you got to throw in a little fun because it's meant to be fun. If we show a goofy guy in a hat doing something crazy and we talk about it for half an inning, it's funny. It's not because, anything else. We're not taking away from the game, but we're going to show we had a clown in Wrigley that lost his fantasy football. We kept showing him. Why? Because it's funny and people see that and they want to laugh about that because it's real life, because that's what happens in real life. It's not like we got to be so serious. It's baseball. It's fun.
Yeah. I was at a hockey game recently, not to name drop here. He's been on this podcast, Chris Pronger. All right. He's a friend. He's a Hall of Fame hockey guy. And we were at the game and they showed me the hockey puck that they use in the NHL now. It's got all these little dots. I've got one here in my office. All analytics. They can tell you how long in a game the puck has been on the stick of pick your player, Patrick Kane or whatever, or how long it's been in the offensive zone or whatever. Amazing stuff. By the way, it really bothers me now that I watch a baseball game and a catcher's not throwing down two fingers, one finger, sliding his hand to the right or the left. I don't like it. He's hitting a button on his leg, AJ. Come on, man.
I love it. I love that. You know why? Because you don't got to worry about people stealing their signs. So why not? I mean, I'm all for it. Plus, it makes the game quicker. Like the pitch clock, best thing ever invented for broadcasters, by the way, because the games are over in like 2 hours and 30 minutes. Instead of 3 hours and 30 minutes. So it's an hour less of talking I have to do. So the only thing is you have to learn how to be quick, because if you want to get a replay in or you got to get a point in, it's got to be quick, concise, and there's no like riffraff. It is like, here's what happened, boom, all right, next pitch, because the next pitch happens so quick. So I'm all for the pitch comm. I'm all for touching the button as long as they work in their head. And I'm all for speeding the game up. Trust me, as a player, Craig, I wanted those games over quick, man. I didn't need 4 hour games. I was like, gosh, I'm tired. 4 hours. Let's get 2.5 and go.
Yeah. I get it. It's not the answer I thought I was going to get from. All right. Two things before we go, and I appreciate your time. Tracks to Success. This podcast is about inspiring people, inspiring stories. And lots of people are successful. Some see their journey cut short or it doesn't go the way they want it to go. And then they have to find a new success. They have to find a next, if you will. Were you ever scared about your days after baseball? Because you pivoted very well. And what could you share with those that might be listening or watching about the fact that a career is really not a straight line for most people, no matter what you do?
I was never worried after I was done, because I had worked for Fox for a long time, and we had already talked about kind of going into broadcasting when I was done. So I was very, very, very lucky about that. And then luckily I've been able to do it. And, depending on who you ask on Twitter, I'm good at it or not good at it. But as long as the Fox executives keep signing me to deals, then I feel like I'm okay. But I'll tell you this, and I don't think a lot of people out there know this story. So I get called up to the big leagues in 1998 in September, and I'm 21 years old. And I'm like, I made it. I made the big leagues at 21 years old, right out of high school. Go to spring training next year and, later cut, don't make the team. But I didn't think I was going to make the team. I go up and down that year in 1999. And I ended up breaking my wrist at the end of the year. So I missed like the September call-ups, but I'd still gotten some time in because the starting catcher had gotten hurt. So I was kind of up and down and whatever. So then 2000, I go in and they had Terry Steinbach was our catcher and they let him go. And they're like, we're going with some younger catchers. So I'm kind of like, all right, I'm going to got a great shot to make the big league team here out of spring training in 2000. Well, I get first cut. I get sent out to the minor leagues. First cut in big league camp. I'm like, crushed, right? And I'm like, what happened? And they don't really give you a reason. They just say, you're just not ready. And I'm like, geez, I've been up and I've done pretty well and I've done well in the minor leagues. Like, what else do y'all need to see? So I end up going down to the minor league camp, and I'm literally sitting. I'll never forget. I was sitting on like one of those physio balls in the batting cage. It was like 2 days later, and not only did they not only did I not make the big league team, they didn't even send me to AAA. They sent me to AA. Right. So I went from being in the big leagues, being in AAA, being up and down to, by the way, you're shit canned to AA all the way back. Right. And I am like, so I'm sitting on a physio ball and this is like kind of right when cell phones had kind of hit a little bit. And I had a cell phone and I'm like calling my agent and calling my wife and talking. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this. Like, I just, what is going on? Like, I need to figure a way out of, this organization or this thing and really take a look. And they're like, just get through it. It'll be fine. They obviously give you the talk. And I went to AA. And I got to play for my manager that I played for like 3 years in the past, right? He's an old catcher. His name's John Russell. He's still managing. He managed the AAA Mariners. He was a big league manager. He's been a bench coach for Buck Showalter and some other teams. And I get back and we talk. He's like, let's go chat. And so this is like the next day. And he's like, I know you're disappointed about going back here, but he's like, this is why. And he sat me down and he goes, and it's exactly what we talked about. He's like, you got to find yourself. He's like, they don't believe that you really believe in what you're doing. You don't really anything that stands out. He's like, you're a good player. He's like, you could do it, but they don't think that you can handle the team and you don't think you could be the leader that you need to be. So you're here back with me and we're going to work on it. And we went to work, and about a month later, I'll never forget, we were in Akron, Ohio. And I was doing fine. I was doing pretty well. And he sits me down. He says, all right. He goes, I know what it is. I need you to figure it out. He goes, I need the player that plays with their hair on fire. He's like, when you play mad and you play and you want to kill the other team, then you're a better player. He's like, you need to find that every day. And that's kind of when it was like, oh, I need to take that next step, which is what I talked about, like playing with the hatred. He's like, you need to, he's like, you need to talk shit. He's like, you need to just be that. He's like, that is when you are at your best. He's like, you need to figure that out every day. And then so I was like, okay. I'm like, well, I don't really want to be, mean to people, but I was like, okay. So we kind of start figuring it out. And he would kind of walk by and take some subtle jabs at me, but he knew that deep down it would work. And then about a month later, I went to AAA. I got called up to AAA again, and I went there and he had another talk with me before I went. He's like, "Listen, don't change." He's like, "Don't let the other people that are there bring you down. Just be yourself." And so I went to AAA for about another 2 months, and I went to the big leagues to get called up. And he comes up and he's like, "Hey, you're doing good. Just keep doing what you're doing." And so then from then I stuck up there the whole time. But it was a process. Trust me. There were many times, you go from the big leagues to AA, you're like, what am I doing? Like, am I that bad? So it's never a straight line. And then trust me, there were plenty of times I hit free agency. You talked about the 7 teams I played for before I signed with the White Sox. It was hard to find a job. I mean, I had some offers. They weren't really with the teams I wanted to go to. Hawk Harrelson sat down, called Kenny Williams, the GM at the time. We had to have a 3-hour phone call. He's like, I don't know that we want you on our team. So we had to go through some stuff that he said had happened. And some of it were lies. Some of it, I gave him my side of it. And then he ended up signing me to the White Sox, and we went on to win the World Series. So listen, there was plenty of times where I had to figure it out because I was like, this sucks. I don't know if I want to do this. But fortunately, I stuck through it. I had a great support system at home. And, certain people help you through your life and get you to the point where you figure it out.
Here's what I've learned as we kind of wrap this up about you in this conversation. And as I said, I've known you for a while. I talk a lot in my talks about the difference between have to and get to. And it sounds like you're a big time get to guy. I get to be a broadcaster right now. That's where I am. I get to be in the big leagues. Wow. I'm going to do everything. Not I have to go play today. I get to. That's a big thing. Is that a fair assessment of you?
Oh, 100%. I've said this, I was so privileged, so lucky, so blessed, whatever you want to call it, to get to do what I do still. I wake up sometimes and I'm like, man, I'm doing the Mets, Phillies, NLDS on national television with, 15 million people watching this game, whatever the numbers are unbelievable. I think we had 8 million a game watching our broadcast. Like, I get to do that. I get to do a podcast / TV show every day. It's not because I have to. Are there days you wake up and say, gosh, I have to go to work today? That's every job, right? But then if you turn it around and say, all right, I get to talk to, today we have Max Muncy and Ken Rosenthal, and I forget who else was on our show. Well, I get to talk to those guys. Max Muncy won a World Series less than a week ago. I get to talk to him about what that feeling is like, right? I get to talk to Ken Rosenthal about free agency and guys who won Gold Gloves. That's pretty honored stuff to get to do. So I think, listen, people, sometimes people are like, oh, you're kind of negative about some stuff. No, I'm actually not. I'll tell you the truth. And if it's good, it's good. If it's bad, it's bad. But I get to work in a job that I love every day, and not everyone gets to do that.
I will say this. I get to do a lot of podcasts, and I feel like I was privileged to get to do this one. Always appreciate your time, continued success. You're crushing it. I'm a big fan, always have been, and I appreciate the time here on Tracks to Success.
Thanks, Craig. I appreciate it. I want some green Converse. I haven't got my green Converse yet.
Yeah, you're a standout guy. At least you understand it. I get it. We'll have a dinner in Orlando, and maybe we'll find a way to bring you one.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Take care. Time now for our closing segment. We call it Getting Ahead. My thoughts on helping you find your track to success. And it's brought to you by Ahead. If you're looking for the best in headwear, Ahead has you covered. From a robust collegiate collection with more than 30 universities to choose from, to styles featuring golf legends Palmer, Nicklaus, and Sorenstam, to fits for all 6 teams in the new TGL Golf League, visit AheadUSAShop.com. That's AheadUSAShop.com. And use code TTS at checkout to receive 20% off your purchase. That's AheadUSAShop.com and code TTS, 20% off. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with AJ Pierzynski, 2-time All-Star, and forever, as he talked about, he will be known as a World Series champion. Now, if you listen to him, he's pretty wound up, right? He's got a lot of energy. He's really excited about things. But he also, amidst having a strong opinion and a strong presence, has something else that I notice about him. And I noticed it during his playing days. He's got a sense of calm. He really does. And that's what I want to focus on as we talk about getting ahead. Now, we can't always control chaos. It happens. Things feel all out of whack and a lot going on. And you know what? When it comes to leadership, most people don't pay attention to you when everything is going great. But when things are a bit chaotic, all eyes are on you because they want to see how you handle it. A catcher's job is to manage the field. Everything's in front of them. We talked about that. And to have a sense of calm. So being the captain of a baseball team is something that I think you could take into your world as well. While they see everything in front of them, I want you to think about seeing everything in front of you. And the next time something happens that's a bit chaotic in your business world or things feel uncomfortable, challenge yourself. Be the calm presence because people are looking at you. And when they do, show them that everything's going to be okay. Trust me, if you do that, if you have that sense of calm in your leadership, your tracks to success will be a whole lot easier. I hope you enjoyed the show. Hope you enjoyed AJ and all of his insight. Until next time, I'm Kraig Kann. Let's stay connected.
Don't forget to subscribe to the show for more great interviews and Kraig's thoughts on reaching your highest personal and professional summit. Find it wherever you get your podcasts and on the Kraig Kann YouTube channel and KraigCannSpeak.com.